I'm making a very short video to tell Game Revolution what controllers I think are the best controllers of all time. Now, since I've always loved flight simulators before actually taking flying lessons, I found it necessary to go out and get real flight simulator equipment. So, this is the PlayStation Dual Analog Flight Stick. I got this for about $60 at the Wiz. Now, that was back when the Wiz was what Best Buy is now. The Wiz was a small electronics store. Some people may remember it from the 80s. The PlayStation Dual Analog Flight Stick disappointed me by never being able to work with the game Warhawk, which is basically the entire reason why I bought a PlayStation in the first place. But this flight stick was absolutely incredible when playing the game Colony Wars. I mean, it had everything. It had the hi-hat switch. It had this stick, which you could use as a throttle, and as you can see, there's a button on the back of this one. There's also a second trigger right here. I believe Colony Wars, there were so many buttons on this controller that you could set it up just about any way you wanted, and Colony Wars worked perfect with it. And I believe Colony Wars Vengeance and a couple of other flight simulators work great with it. And it has two modes, analog mode and it has a digital mode. You could use this to play other games. Unfortunately, most other games just weren't designed to use a flight stick. Most games were, you just use a D-pad, and it required twitch reflexes. Like Warhawk never would work with this, but Warhawk worked absolutely perfect with the regular PlayStation controller. I believe I got this for about $69. Now, it's a shame that they've moved so far away from flight simulators. It's really a shame that they don't offer you games where you have to get a controller that's game specific. But this was back in the days when I really loved Sony and the stuff that they were making. Now that they've moved over to that PlayStation Move bullshit, I don't even look at them twice. This is the Saitek X45 joystick. Now, I bought this as a replacement for the Microsoft Sidewinder force feedback joystick. As you can see, this joystick has an adjustable throttle where you can adjust the tension. You can adjust the tension on the bottom so that you can make it easier or harder to move. It has multiple axes. It has not only the throttle, but right here it has a rudder pedal under it. And I used to play Jane's United States Air Force Combat Simulator a lot, which was an incredibly cool game. It wasn't very hard. It was very easy to take off and land. It was very easy to track down enemy targets. Very simple game to play. It was fantastic. It also has 3 settings that you can use. These are called the memory buttons 1, 2, and 3. And it has a lot of different ways of setting the game up. I believe I used to set up this little hi-hat knob and this button right here to slew the radar, because you were able to turn these knobs in Falcon 4.0, which was one of the best and most difficult military combat simulators ever made. Falcon 4.0, you had to actually pay close attention to how your radar was set up just so you'd be able to see the enemy. It had a fire button right here. I don't even remember what I used that for. It has a trigger slide right here for your pinky. It has the thumb joystick right here for you to fire off missiles. Then this was unnecessary, but they had a flip up button so that you could get to the fire button. Unfortunately, this was a little flimsy, like it just goes up and down easy. It's just a piece of cheap plastic, while the rest of this is actually higher quality plastic. These buttons light up when you plug this thing in USB. 2 hi-hat joysticks for whatever you pretty much wanted to set it up for. What I usually did was I usually used these as look buttons, because if you did that, this way you could look around the cockpit while you're hunting down enemies. But this was a really good joystick. My only problem was as you can see, I have a very big hand. So when I would put my hand inside the guard, which you can see, my hand could barely squeeze in this. I have a very, very big hand, as you can see. So for me, the Xbox 360 joystick And the Xbox 360 controller has always been my favorite more than the PlayStation controller because it was easier to get my fingers around the thumbsticks without getting carpal tunnel syndrome. But the Saitek X45 was an excellent joystick. The newer ones aren't that great because, you know, Saitek never put force feedback into them. And I'm really disappointed about that because most games offer force feedback. This right here was the Guncon replica controller. Now, if you don't remember, for the original PlayStation, the Guncon was designed to be an ultra-accurate light gun. And the regular one that came with the PlayStation didn't have a reciprocating slide, like in the arcade. So every time you fire off a shot, this gun right here offered realistic recoil. And I believe I paid about $60 for this when it came out. But this was a really, really good controller, and that's why I'm holding on to it, because someday I may bother to set up my PlayStation again just for, you know, games like Time Crisis and Time Crisis 2. And I think I had a couple others, I just don't remember what they were. This was a really good controller, and of course, it came with the pedal, which you have to step on in order to duck and reload. And the other thing that I mentioned that I had was the Microsoft. This is the Microsoft Flight. This is the Microsoft Force Feedback joystick. When these first came out, they were like $100. And this is a pretty good joystick for general flight simulators. You can use it for certain other games, but it really only works well for flight simulators. The thing that annoyed me was they never made a separate throttle. Right here, they have a sliding throttle. I never liked that. I always like having the HOTAS set up where it's hands-on throttle stick. Well, before the Guncon was the Nintendo Zapper. They made two versions of the Zapper I'm aware of. This is the orange version, which they made to stop kids from taking guns out onto the street, or gun replicas, and getting targeted by police. From what I remember, this gun was designed after Clint Eastwood's Auto 44. I can't remember which movie he had a gun like this in, but this was back in the days when they actually knew how to make games over at Nintendo. This was a really good light gun. Actually looked a lot like a gun. And it was fun to play with. Now, I mean, the Guncon was a vast improvement, but this was actually a pretty good controller when it was out. And I have my Power Glove. I forced one of my parents to get this. I think it was about $50 or $60 when it came out, because Nintendo usually overcharged on shit. I don't think I can fit my hand in this anymore, because my hand is a lot bigger than it was when I was a kid. But this thing never, ever worked well. And even though this one still works, actually, I still have the sensors, but it sucked. And Nintendo has a long history of releasing shitty products and never standing by them. So instead of getting simple games that you could possibly play with this piece of shit, it basically just rotted.